Can I ask you a personal question? Well, of course I can. I'm standing up here and you're down there. When was the last time you felt truly happy deep within your soul? When was the last time you felt overwhelmed by spontaneous feelings of deep joy and contentment and fulfillment? Do you remember the moment? Do you remember where you were or who was with you or what you were doing in that moment? Do you remember the conditions and contexts that created that feeling of happiness? And how does it feel now to reflect on that experience? You have likely noticed that happiness has been a topic of much conversation from many different sectors in recent years. Social scientists and psychologists, newspaper columnists and members of the clergy, politicians and best-selling books have explored the theme from a wide variety of perspectives. In fact, an Amazon.com search for the question, "How to be happy?" yields 136,000 results. I can assure you, having scanned them, that many purport to provide the one secret to a happy life, which of course begins with a simple click to order the book. Clearly, happiness is on our minds. One reason for the pervasiveness of research and advice and publication on how to become and remain happy is how elusive happiness seems for we human creatures. Recently, I saw one of those cartoon-a-day calendars, and the cartoon for that particular day caught my attention. It featured a drawing of two dogs deep in conversation with each other. One dog is standing with a ball in his mouth, and the other is seated in front of him with his ball on the grass. The empty-mouthed Fido asks his pal, "But tell me, are you happy with your current ball?" Now, some reflections on this topic are far wiser than others. A couple of years ago, David Brooks wrote a column that went viral. It was titled, "The Moral Bucket List." Listen to how he begins. "About once a month, I run across a person who radiates an inner light. These people can be in any walk of life. They seem deeply good. They listen well, they make you feel honored and valued. You often catch them looking after other people, and as they do, their laugh is musical and their manner infused with gratitude. They are not thinking about the wonderful work they are doing for someone else. They are not thinking about themselves at all. Whenever I meet such a person, it brightens my whole day. But I confess I often have a sadder thought. It occurs to me that I've achieved a decent level of career success, but I have not achieved that. I have not achieved that generosity of spirit, that depth of character." Brooks goes on to draw a sharp contrast between what he calls resume virtues, the skills and experiences that any of us brings to the marketplace, and eulogy virtues, the ones that are talked about at our funeral or memorial service. What causes a person to radiate an inner light? Which qualities characterize the lives of these deeply good people we encounter? Again, Brooks' list sounds to me like a catalog of Christian virtues, a humble and profound honesty about our own weakness, an awareness of our need for redemptive assistance from outside, the gift of decentering love, a sense of purpose and vocation, a well-developed conscience. Brooks summarizes, people on the road to inner light do not find their vocations by asking, what do I want from life? They ask, what does life ask of me? They are not living for happiness as it is conventionally defined. Are you happy with your current ball? The cartoon captures the fleeting nature of what we call happiness, something for which we must always be striving and reaching and searching and working, a focus on our individual lives, our personal fulfillment and success. And in fact, happiness is often correlated with success, which comes as a result of developing those resume virtues. What do I want from life, and how can I go get it? But it seems to me that even success is a thin and transient goal that seems always to elude us. Is there a better way? I think so. I think it begins with that eulogy virtue question. What is life asking of me? Or better put, for people of faith, what does God ask of me? The passage just read from Matthew's Gospel is the beginning of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Now, this morning before you, I will confess that I have always imagined the moment exactly the way it appeared in the illustration of it in my children's Bible. Jesus was standing on the mountaintop high above an immense and innumerable crowd of people, a kind of mix in my young mind between the opening scene of Disney's The Lion King, you remember and a Billy Graham stadium crusade. So it surprised me in studying this passage to find that the reason Jesus climbs that mountain is to escape the great crowds of people. There is no large crowd for Jesus to stand before on this particular mountaintop. In fact, Jesus does not stand at all. Matthew says that Jesus sat down and the disciples gathered around him. Let us consider then that this is a sermon not for the whole world, but for you and me, the community of faith. This is a sermon that presupposes as its audience a community defined by a different set of standards, living by a different set of values, looking at the world through a different lens. And when Jesus opens his mouth to begin this powerful sermon, the first word on his lips in the Greek is Makarios. It is translated blessed, but I worry that this well-worn churchy word doesn't capture the fullness of the term. To be Makarios is to be content, to be fulfilled, to be happy in the deepest, most lasting sense. And so Jesus begins his sermon to his disciples with a declaration of those people who are most fulfilled and happy, those who are Makarios. And it is a curious list. The poor in spirit, the mourners, the meek, the merciful, the persecuted, not exactly those who one might expect to be most content with life the way it is. Now, some interpreters have suggested that this list, which we call the Beatitudes, is a prescription for righteous living. In other words, become pure in spirit, and then you shall be blessed. But that's not the way Jesus speaks them. Happy are the poor in spirit. Makarios are those who mourn. Here, now. A surprising proclamation that flies in the face of our definitions of happiness and blessedness. Certainly far from prosperity gospels or happiness how-to manuals or touchdown dances pointing to heaven. But this, I believe, is precisely the point of the Beatitudes. That we humans are always tempted to believe that blessing comes through our effort and exertion. So by offering these affirmations of Makarios, Jesus reminds his followers that divine blessing always precedes human action. Makarios, the blessing of God, is not something for which we strive. It is a gift that we receive. And in order to receive it, we must empty our hands. The Beatitudes are worth memorizing, are worth knowing by heart because they radically redefine happiness as something we are given, not something that we can earn. It is a new definition of what human life is all about. Not how much success, power, and influence you can wield, not how many possessions you have accumulated, but whether or not you are willing to reorient your life toward God's kingdom. You see, those whom Jesus calls blessed have one key characteristic in common. They need God's blessing. In essence, those who most deeply need to be blessed are. It is our vulnerability and weakness that open us and turn us into willing vessels of God's blessing. And this is not the only place in the gospel accounts where we find this redefinition of blessing. Throughout the gospels, Jesus proclaims a kind of subversive happiness. If you want to save yourself, he says, stop worrying about yourself all the time. Lose yourself. For those who lose their lives for my sake and for the sake of the gospel, those are the ones who will save their lives. If you want to be first in the kingdom of heaven, get in the back of the line. For those who are last will be first. If you want to be great in the kingdom of God, serve someone. Whenever we lower our defenses, whenever we open our hearts, whenever we serve another by freely sharing the blessings we have received, whenever we let go of our stranglehold on control and trust God's grace, that's when we radiate that inner light, and blessed are those who are aware of the blessing they have already received. For they will be fulfilled, knowing that they live into God's call. In 1893, a 36-year-old professor of English at Wellesley College, Catherine Lee Bates, made a trip to Colorado Springs by train in order to teach a summer course at Colorado College. On that train journey, inspired by the beauty and majesty of her country, Bates wrote a poem, "Oh, beautiful for spacious skies," it began. But the less familiar verses of that iconic poem are worth our remembering today. May God thy gold refine till all success be nobleness, and every gain divine. Success defined by nobleness, a sign of God's grace shed on us all, a call to share that deep blessing that we have received. You see, Makarios is the feeling of fulfillment that comes when we choose to bring joy not to ourselves, but to someone else. It is the blessing of knowing deep within your soul that there is more to life than the resume. It is the contentment of experiencing God's presence when we choose to give ourselves away in love. It is the joy offered to those who are free to receive it. I promise you this, if the elusive goal of conventional happiness is your life's purpose, you will find yourself constantly frustrated with your inability to grasp it, at least not for very long. But if it is Makarios that you most need, then you need only do one thing. Open your heart to receive it. Mary Oliver puts it best in her poem aptly titled "The Summer Day." She writes, "I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" Makarios, God's blessing of that one precious life that you have been given. Makarios, the blessing of awareness that God's kingdom still comes among us if only we pay attention. When we are open to receive it, when we are ready to share it, blessed are we. Amen.